Good morning. Happy Sabbath. Looks like a few of us are still trickling in, and that's great. I know we're starting earlier than normal. I just want to kind of reword what I said last night, and that I'm just amazed at how the Lord has led in this ministry. When I told someone what we were working on, they said, because I said, I'm so intimidated, and they said, Erica, the Lord equips the called. He doesn't call the equipped.
Mm-hmm.
And I just was like, okay, that's why I'm going to keep going. And so please take a look at some of the books that Pastor Bill has when you have time at some point today. Of course, we have potluck in the church, in the gym after church. We'll have about a 15-minute break between Sabbath school and church. There will be an envelope going around at some point just to support the Bible study that usually takes place at this time, in case you're wondering what that is. And bring your hearts open to the Lord, and thank you for being here. Pastor Bill did send me 3 of these books 2 summers ago when I was still contemplating this ministry, and so I'd love to start a book club. If that's something that you're interested in, let me know. And so I will welcome Pastor Bill up this morning.
Good morning. So how important is it in relationships and in life to have a sense of humor? It's really big. It's really, really big. A man and his wife were going to the zoo. And it was one of those zoos where you drive your car through and the animals are in the wild and you're in your car and you interact with the animals from inside your car. And so they were having a wonderful day. They were taking pictures, and they were in their pickup that had a camper on it. And wouldn't you know it, an elephant, a big old elephant, elephants can weigh 11 tons, and the big old elephant walked out from the trees and kind of walked towards them, and they thought, this is great pictures. So they started snapping pictures, and he got bigger and bigger and closer, and wouldn't you know it, the elephant, he kind of I don't know if he's scratching himself or what, but he leaned on the hood, the front hood of their car, and they heard the sound of breaking glass, and the guy was like, oh no, my truck! So he's honking the horn, and the elephant lumbered off. And so they drove to the office, and when they got there, he got out and looked, and yeah, the front of his car was all crunched in, of his truck. So he showed that to the zoo people, and they said, oh yeah, that, if a lion scratches your car or whatever, we have insurance for that, so we'll fix your vehicle. And so they filled out all the forms, and he said to his wife, I think I'm ready to go home. So they started driving home, and they passed this is a true story, by the way. They passed the scene of a hit-and-run accident. And so the police were looking for someone with the front end of their car damaged. And so when the police saw him driving by, they pulled him over. And the officer came around, and he asked the man, what happened to your truck? And without thinking, the man said, what did he say? An elephant sat on it. And the officer, his face got really red. He thought he was being disrespectful, and the man was like, here, honey, give me the papers. So he handed him the papers, and the officer's like, get out of here. So they're driving down the road, and the man says to his wife, honey, he said, I've just got a headache. Could you drive? I want to go back in the camper. And so he got out. His wife slid over to the driver's seat. He went and got in the camper. They're driving home, and he went to sleep. They came to a construction zone where they turned the sign, stop. So the vehicle comes to a stop, and that woke him up. And he's like looking around, we're not home yet, we're not moving, where are we? And so he looked out the window, and they were just on the road, and he thought, oh, we must have car trouble. So he got out of the back of the vehicle And he's going to walk around to the passenger side, right? The sign turned at that moment, and she drove off and left him standing there by the side of the road. So now he has a long walk to get home. And this story happened before we have cell phones. So he was walking down the road, and along came a police car. He flagged the car down, thinking maybe the policeman could help him. It was the same police officer. And the police officer pulled over. "What is it, sir?" "You again? What is it?" He said, "My wife drove off and left me." The policeman said, "Get in. Where do you live? I'll take you home." So the police officer knew a shortcut. So he got him home, and his wife wasn't there yet. So he waves goodbye to the police officer, and he walks up to his front door, and he's looking for his keys. Where are his keys? They're in the truck. So he can't get in his house, so he just sits there on the front porch of the house. And he's just kind of sitting there. This has been a day. This has just been a day. And he's kind of sitting there, and his wife comes driving in the driveway. And where does she think he is? The last she knew, he was in the back. And she's looking at him, and she drove right into the garage door. What would we do if we couldn't have a sense of humor? It's really important, and sometimes we lose that. And that's something that's really important. There was a man and his wife, and he did a lot of home repair and those kind of jobs. And he kept asking his wife, "Honey, could you come and hand me this tool? Or could you hold the ladder while I'm up here? Or could you hold the other end of this?" Or he kept, and her reply would always be, "Just a sec." You ever said that? Just a sec. And he was out in the yard, and he was doing some work in the yard, and their neighbors were in the adjoining yards, and he said, "Honey, could you come and do this?" And she said, "Just a sec." And for some reason, it got to him at that moment. I mean, he was really annoyed that she, instead of saying, "Yes, I'm coming," she would always say, "Just a sec." And so he looked at her, he said, "No more sex. I am just sick and tired of sex." And his neighbors are looking at him. Oh, man. So, why are jokes funny? Because there's an element of truth in them. Now, if I tell you a joke, would it offend you? I'm going to tell a joke on men, and I'm going to tell a joke on women. If you're okay with it. You promise you won't be mad at me and throw hymnals at me, right? How many married men does it take to screw in a light bulb? Just one. They hold the bulb and the world revolves around them. Now, if my wife was here, I couldn't tell the second joke. She doesn't like it. 2 doors into heaven. One door had a sign over it, men who've been bossed around by their wives. And there was a line at that door as far as the eye could see. The other door said men who have not been bossed around by their wives. There was one man standing there. And the guys in the other line were looking at him, and they were looking at each other, and finally 2 of them went over to him, and they said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "My wife told me to stand here." Ladies, are we still friends? What is at stake? What is at stake in the way we love each other? What is at stake? It is, when you think in terms of the metaphor, the biggest metaphor that the Bible uses for marriage is it is compared to Christ and the church. There's something at stake there. Now, we struggle. We're broken. And so our tendency is to immediately feel shame. We shouldn't do that. That's not what this is about. To think of what God intends to convey through marriage, does it make sense that the enemy would really go hard after relationships when you think of what the meaning God wants to convey through it? That this is a picture of Christ and the church. So, what I would like to ask if we could do is we could put away our own, I'm not enough, if we could put that away and we could lift our eyes and look to God for what we need and ask Him to give us a transfusion. There are many times where I find my own stubbornness, my own issues come up where I don't want to be gracious and I don't want to be kind. And I have to pray to God, Lord, I need a transfusion. I can't manufacture the kindness, the patience, the forgiveness I need right now. But I'm asking you to give me a transfusion. Do you believe He'll do that? Amen. He will. He will. Here's the thing. You've heard about the love languages. We tend to love people the way we want to be loved. And so empathy and understanding means that God wants us to instead look at our partner, the people we're in relationships with, and say, how do they want to be loved? How do they need to be loved? And what helps them? There are a lot of differences we encounter, the ways we're different from each other. For example, men and women have a lot of differences between them. We come from different families. My wife's family, wonderful people, but when they had conflict, they would just break off communication for several days, and that was they would kind of go in their own separate corners, and my family would engage, sometimes not screaming, but, passionately. And so for my wife, when we got married, that felt like I was yelling at her. I wasn't meaning to. We were just talking. But when you come from a family where when there's conflict, you just break off communication, then that would feel like really aggressive. So that's part of, we have to learn what the other person's family patterns and how they handled things. And that's one reason when I do pre-marriage counseling, I have people take a look at their family of origin. How did they process emotions? How did they resolve conflict? And I will actually have them do a family tree of their families, and then I'll put them side by side, and I'll ask them the question, what do you want to bring from your family of origin to be part of your new family? And what do you want to do differently as you build your own family? Then there are introverted, extroverted people. And then last night we talked about attachment styles. And then there's birth order. Birth order is a significant thing we don't really talk about a lot. Take firstborns, for example. How many firstborns do we have here? Okay, we have wow! Your church has a lot of firstborns. That is really interesting. Most presidents of the United States are firstborns. Why? What would influence firstborns to be achievers, high achievers? Talk to me. What do you think would? They're what? They're blazing the path. And the parents, this is their first child, the parents' hopes and dreams, they want them to do well, right? And so they put a lot into them. And then the firstborns, how often do they get held up as an example for the younger kids? And so firstborns have a sense of drivenness, achievement that is a good thing. A sense of leadership. The middle children, what are characteristics of how many middle children do we have here? The middle children are the best communicators. That kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Because they communicate up with the older and then down with the younger ones. The middle children are the best communicators, and they have the greatest sense of angst. Who am I? Because they're not the oldest. They're not the baby. So they have the greatest sense of who am I, where do I fit in? The youngest borns, it's interesting, they've studied this, and the youngest borns are often comedians. They're the entertainers. Youngest ones, stereotypically, it's not always the case. They are rarely presidents of the United States. Rarely. How many youngest borns do we have here? Youngest borns are the most fun. Because you think about it, the parents, by the time they get to the youngest ones, they figured it out a little bit, they're a little more relaxed, and they're having more fun. And the youngest ones have more trouble stereotypically, making decisions. But they're generally really fun. The operating principle is, it's a great challenge if you marry someone in your birth order. Why would that be true, you think? If I'm trying to fill the same role. My wife and I are both firstborns. We will walk sometimes. We'll be walking somewhere, and there's a way you could go two different ways, and we'll go two different ways. And we'll look at each other like, aren't you coming? No, and it's wired into you. So there could be a competition for a role. What's interesting when men and women are in conflict is they now do a lot of studies, body temperature, where they can track the cortisol in the system, they can brain waves and pulse and all these things. And they found out when a man and woman are in conflict, who is physiologically more affected by it, a woman or a man? A man. We are a little bit afraid of you. And what do I mean by that? A man really doesn't like it when the woman he loves is upset with him. It has a physiological... Now, I'm not saying women like it, but it has more of a physiological effect on men. So these big, tough guys, actually inside, there is some degree of fragileness that we have as men. For a lot of men, particularly I was raised this way, the only emotion that is safe to show is anger. Have you seen that? How does that work for us? How does that work for us? Boys are not raised to be intimate. But boys are raised to be competitive and performers. Girls are raised to want more from their relationships. And so this sets up women to be either unfulfilled or over-functioning. We raise girls to focus on energy, on connection, and we raise boys to focus on achievement. Men are taught to mistrust their feelings, especially difficult feelings. Men experience feelings as threatening, feeling overwhelmed or of diminished value. And a lot of times when we don't connect well, it's not that we don't want to, is we don't have the skill set to. And that's where one of the biggest things that I do in premarriage counseling is practical tools. Because I really believe men value connection. I mean, look, for example, at a sports team. Do men get very close to each other on a sports team? And how much do they love that connection? Army buddies. So men can connect, but we need the skill set in the environment to do so. What's interesting is that people who can be both tough and tender, studies show they are the ones with the strongest mental health. Brené Brown is someone I really admire, and her work, and she does a lot of work with the U.S. military, and her work on shame and vulnerability. And she has found, for working with warriors, like fighter pilots and officers in the military, that for them to actually be courageous and brave, they also have to be vulnerable. Because it's kind of like there are certain trees where the branches are rigid, and so they get an ice storm. What do those branches do? But the branches that have flexibility, what will they do they'll bend. And so she finds that under extreme pressure, if men don't know how to be vulnerable, they cannot operate on optimum bravery and courage and efficiency. So one of the big things about our culture is the icons. You think of the Marlboro Man. Back when I was growing up, they stopped advertising cigarettes, but they used to have the Marlboro Man. And this idea of a man is strong and independent, and he doesn't show his feelings. He's kind of a loner. And the thing about marriage is the opposite of that. It's partnership. It's connection. Here's what is helpful for you to understand. When you are interacting with a man who hasn't learned to be vulnerable, vulnerability to him feels like he's under attack. Feels very unsafe for him. Here's the thing that I noticed, though. I ran the last church I pastored, I ran a men's group, because here we had all these men who didn't like going to Sabbath school, and they'd bring their kids, and then they would just sit there in the lobby and just chat. And this woman came to me and said, Bill, we've got to do something. Could you start a Sabbath school for these men? I said, okay. There was no room. All the rooms, so we found a closet. It was a large closet, but it was a closet. We emptied it out. The men's group was in a closet, this big closet. And so we'd meet there, sitting there in chairs, and over the course of 3 years, we met together. And here's what, yes. Don't make the joke, please. So we got pretty full. What happened, though, is over time, I would always start by doing a check-in. How was your week? What was good? What was bad? And then when we would study a text, I would always have questions to get people talking. And as time went by, we started telling stories. It's very important for men to tell stories. And here's what I learned. The men, when they started telling stories and laughing, it couldn't be too serious. We had to laugh a lot. But when we started telling each other our stories, here's what I noticed. I noticed the stories that I would hear more than once. For example, there was a man whose mother died when he was 12. Over the course of that men's group, we heard about that several times. Another guy had an accident he almost died in. We heard about that multiple times. I'll never forget, one man started telling a story, and he and his brother were quite the characters. I went to college with both of them. And just characters. And one day, his brother was getting a spanking. So he was bent over mom's lap, and she was spanking him. And so the little boy that was getting spanked, his face was pointed towards the door. And so the other boy was like this. He was at the door, and he was watching his brother. And so he decided he was going to tease his brother while he was getting spanked. So he's like, and his brother, the crying changed its tone. Now he's crying, and he's angry at his brother, making fun of him at such a vulnerable moment. And the mom looks up, and she sees the other brother. When she's done with him, she calls him over. And he got a spank. And we're sitting there in that little closet, a bunch of men booked in there, and we laughed, and we laughed, and we laughed. In fact, when I see that guy, we'll still talk about that. And what I noticed is when I'm around a group and I see those men always find each other. And if I'm where, they'll always come and find me. And those men, when we journeyed together, We studied Scripture, we prayed together, and we also shared about our hearts. We connected, and let me tell you this, when men feel safe connecting, they absolutely love it. A lot of times is we don't have the skill set to connect. Now let me ask you a question. What happened in that men's group? Do you think it had a spillover effect in those men's relationships? It did. It did. It's about accessing the heart. And here's the thing. One of the most important prophecies in Scripture, in my opinion, about the end of time is what God is going to do to the hearts of men. And it says in Malachi chapter 4, 5, and 6, it says, in the last days, the spirit and power of Elijah will turn the hearts of fathers to their children and the hearts of children to their fathers. That is a priority of heaven, the hearts of men. And the devil wants to shut down the hearts of men because when men aren't in their hearts, what do we get into? We medicate. We medicate. And that's never good for us. That's never good for us. Strength is not the absence of vulnerability. In fact, it's a weak person who can't be vulnerable. There's another thing that I've come to really believe in. Men, God calls us to go first. We talk about men being called to lead. I think that leading is in serving. He calls us to go first. In Ephesians 5, when it talks about marriage, it says first to men, love your wives. We are called to go first. So, one of the things that the Gottmans, and the Gottmans are a group, or a couple that talk about, they've studied at the University of Washington, they've studied relationships for years and years. And what they came up to was that the most important thing in relationships is the connection, the heart connection between the people in the relationship. That's the most important thing. And they've studied this for over 30 years. And they've kept files so they can see the level of connection and the emotional connection that people had. And they came up with two things that protect the connection, that feed the connection. Number one is repair. There are going to be days like the couple who went to the zoo. He had to, not only did he have to get his truck repaired, he had to fix his garage door. I mean, you're going to have days like that. Repair. Tell me what you think repair means. What is repair? To fix or to mend. What does that mean in terms of intimate relationships? What does it mean to do repair? To restore? Please.
You look at the word repair, pairing.
Ooh.
The pairing process.
Ooh, did you hear that? Anne said repair is to repeat the pairing process. It's to reconnect. Can I quote you on that? My friend Dr. Ann says repair. But that's beautiful. That is beautiful. It's getting back to on the road again. We get in the ditch, get back on the road, traveling together, the same direction, traveling together. So I think, for example, of my father, and I use him not to discredit him or put him down in any way. Like I said, I love and honor him, and what I appreciate about him more than anyone I've ever seen is he hung in there and he grew. He grew. I would say from his 60s on, he was an incredible dad. He really did well. Before that, challenged. But he grew. He hung in there and he grew. But it was difficult for him to do repair. And I remember I was working with a counselor, and the counselor said to me, he said, Bill, to heal, you're going to need to repair your relationship with your dad. And I said, well, I'd like to, I just don't know how to do it. And he said, you need to talk to him. And I said, I don't think I can do that. You know, the kind of really honest, candid talk. He said, well, then write him a letter. I said, okay, I wrote a letter. And once I started typing, it just poured out. 5 pages. And he said, send the letter to your dad. I said, oh, I just can't do that. He's older now, and I don't want to hurt him, and we've never talked about this. And he's like, do you want to get well? Who asked that question? Do you want to get well? Jesus did. Do you want to get well? And so he said, here's what you do, Bill. Add a paragraph at the beginning of the letter where you say, I'm writing this to you, Dad, because I want us to have a better relationship. And he said, tell him, I'm just telling you what it was like for me to be your son. So I put the letter in an envelope, and I was going on a mission trip with Auburn Academy. John, you helped me go on, you and Ann helped me go on this trip. And I was going with the kids. I did some of my best pastoring on mission trips with kids. And I left the note on the table with the envelope with a note to my wife saying, would you please mail this to my dad? And I come back, and there it sat. I said, you didn't mail it. And she said, I'm not having that letter come to your dad in my handwriting. For some reason, writing the address and the name and putting a stamp on was the hardest part for me. I walked out to the post office box. I opened the box. My hands are shaking. Being vulnerable feels like you're under attack. It was hard. I put it in the mailbox, I closed it, and I started walking away, and I wanted to go back and get the letter out. But I went back in the house, and then I waited. Every day I would go out and check. No response. Every day. Months went by. No response. And then one day I went to the mailbox. I opened it up and looked. And there it was. I'd recognize his handwriting anywhere. I'm holding the letter. My hands are shaking again. I opened the letter. I have most of it memorized. I've read it so many times. Dear Bill, yours is the hardest letter I've ever received, partly because it's true, and partly because no father wants to hear that from his son. You will never know how sorry I am. That's as far as I memorized, because that's what I needed to hear. And our relationship grew. There was a workshop called Foundations, because I used to actually dread Christmas because I would have to see my dad. I went to this workshop called Foundations that helped me process the generational stuff. And when my dad fell in his home and lay on the floor for several days before someone found him, I was able to move him to my house. Without doing that work and getting that help, I never could have done that. And it was a joy to me to take care of him. And we really connected over the last year of his life. Repair is difficult, but it is really important. The other thing besides repair that is really, really important. So by the way, I'm going to talk to the men here. If you find yourself where you know you need to do repair, but it just doesn't feel like you can, you feel like you're in cement or whatever, ask God for a transfusion. Tell God, I can't manufacture this. I can't do it. I need a transfusion of the Holy Spirit to enable me to give grace and to humble myself and be vulnerable. The other thing is, they said that is vital, is what they call bids for connection. When your partner reaches out to connect with you, respond. Now, you may have to say, honey, I would love to, whatever it is, go for a walk, talk, whatever it is, go to lunch, breakfast, whatever. Could we schedule it like for tomorrow? Or in other words, always respond, schedule it. The issue isn't yes or no. The issue is let's schedule it. And they said that bids for connection, when your partner reaches out for a bid for connection, is what is really important to maintaining that bond between people. In 2 Corinthians 7, verse 2 is a really crucial verse in my opinion. 2 Corinthians 7, verse 2, it says, make room for us in your hearts. And essentially, what the Gottmans are saying is that. Make room in your hearts for the people you're in relationship with. Make room in your hearts. So, here's the thought. Our partners usually play out a template that they learned in the relationships they experienced growing up. And so that's why it takes a lot of intentionality to create new kinds of relationships. Women move back into intimacy by daring to tell the truth. Men move back into intimacy by stepping down from the privileged obliviousness and coming in from the cold of disconnection. So I'm going to teach you two tools that I find really, really helpful. The first one is called the turtle and the skunk. So what does a turtle do when they feel in danger? They withdraw, right? Some people are like turtles. When there's stress, when they've got to make a decision, when there's conflict, they kind of get quieter. They withdraw. Why are they doing that? To the other person, sometimes it feels like you're putting up a wall. Not necessarily. Sometimes that is, sometimes it's for a turtle, it's how we process feelings and information is, for a turtle, they need to go in their shell and be alone and think about it and kind of marinate in it and process it. A skunk is the opposite. When a skunk is stressed, do they go inward or outward? How many people know when a skunk is upset? Have you driven on the road and you're miles away and there was a skunk miles away? I mean, that smell is just it's amazing as far as how powerful it is. So some people are like skunks. When they have stress or conflict, they go outward. They want to talk about it, and the turtle doesn't want to talk about it right away. How many of my friends here this morning are turtles? Okay. I was working with a couple doing pre-marriage counseling, and the guy was a skunk, the woman was a turtle, and they were really extreme cases of turtle and skunk. And they'd be driving down the road, and she was just quiet, and he'd say, "You okay?" "Yep." "You sure?" "Yep." "You mad at me?" "Nope." "You sure?" And when we were in pre-marriage counseling, it came out that she was a turtle, and she kind of opened up that she was afraid that it wasn't going to work because his skunk nature, what she didn't know, but I knew, is his mother was bipolar. So you think of during some phases his mother would be, whoo, and then some phases she'd be really quiet. What was the dangerous phase for him? When she was quiet. When she was quiet, it was like a bomb ticking. And so I'll never forget this, because they're happily married. This is quite a few years later. I looked her in the eyes and I said, "It's okay to be a turtle. God wired you that way. It's okay." We just need tools to build a bridge. That's it. Tools to build a bridge. So, when my wife and I first got married, do you think I'm a turtle or a skunk? As there was a math teacher at Walla Walla named Thompson who had this phrase, "It's obvious to the most casual observer." So, I'm about as skunk as you can get, and my wife is about as turtle as you can get. And so, the problem is, I thought that you weren't supposed to go to bed angry, right? So we have a disagreement. Oh dear, we've got to fix this. We're not supposed to go to bed angry, right? So I would try to make her talk when she was in the shell. It doesn't work. And in fact, if you keep trying and banging on the shell, "Can we talk? Hello in there. Hello." You'll make him a snapping turtle. So, what I've learned is, I was talking to her quite a bit later, and I said, when I would try to want to talk with you and you wouldn't engage, I felt like I couldn't breathe. And she said to me, "Bill, when you were trying to make me talk when I wasn't ready yet, I felt like I couldn't breathe." Now that's a problem, isn't it? Everybody deserves to breathe. There's a biblical principle that is really essential in relationships, and that is in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 21. And it is huge. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Out of reverence for Christ, we submit to each other. So that doesn't mean that the strongest-willed person gets to win, does it? That doesn't mean that the person can hold their breath longest gets to win. There was one couple I know who they would have a quarrel and the husband could just go on forever, just complete shutdown, and after a while his wife would finally, whatever it is, she would, okay, you win, because he could hold his breath so long that he would just wear her down. But what do you think that did to the emotional connection? Was repair happening there? No. Because here's the thing. We have a relational credit card, and every time we do something like that, where one person wins and the other feels like they're losing, but they've got to do it because they just can't handle it anymore, a charge is made on that credit card and distance opens up because repair isn't happening. So, what would be the solution when you have a turtle and a skunk married to each other, and the skunk wants to talk right away, and the skunk is a verbal processor, so they can't process it until they can talk about it. But the turtle needs to go in their shell and process there. So how can you build a bridge between them? What? Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Make an appointment. Make an appointment. Yesterday morning, I met with a young couple. No, sorry, that would be Thursday night. I'm doing premarriage counseling with two young couples. I invested a lot of time in this because I didn't get premarriage counseling. A pastor we loved married us, but he was from the old school and he didn't really do premarriage counseling. And I will tell couples when I'm working with them, I wish someone would have told me this. Tools. Because it's kind of like, what if your parents got you a car and didn't teach you to change the tire when it goes flat? What are you going to do? And so the tools in a relationship. So I told this couple, in this case, she's the skunk, he's the turtle, and I said, make the appointment. And I turned to her, is the skunk, and she's sharp. She's an attorney. She's very, very sharp and a real high-performance person. And I said to her, I said, what would it be like for you if you have a conflict, he needs to go in his shell, but you make an appointment and you know, okay, we'll talk. And she said, that changes everything. Because I know we're going to talk. She said, I can relax then, knowing I'm going to get to talk. It's like I can let it go. I turned to him as the turtle. I said, what would it be like for you if you make an appointment and you know she's not going to be coming and bugging you about it until the appointment? He said, He said, I could relax and I could focus on processing and getting ready to talk and work on it together. The whole principle is we've got to work as a team. If we don't work as a team, what will happen is we will start viewing our partner as our adversary. And that's not good. She's never your adversary. She's your partner. He's never your adversary. He's your partner. The problem is, when we don't have the right tools, it can feel like they're our adversary. It changes the dynamics if we're working together as a team. We're in this together. So, we're having conflict. I'm the skunk. How much time do you need before we can talk? What do you think?
Honestly, would depend on what the situation was. A day.
Okay. All right, so tomorrow. Okay. What time?
10 o'clock.
All right. Do you see what we just did? We made an appointment. Now, what is going to be important for the skunk to do once we've made the appointment? What is it important for the skunk to do?
Drop it until then.
Thank you. Don't bring it up. What is that going to communicate to the turtle if the skunk sets that on the shelf and leaves it be until the appointment? You're safe. Respecting the boundaries. What is important for the turtle to do relative to the appointment? Put it on the calendar, show up ready to talk. Absolutely essential. But by then, here's what I've noticed, because I've told this to couples, and then I'll talk to them later, and I'll say, how's it going? Particularly if I know they're really strong turtle-skunk combination. And this is what they'll tell me. Number one, the time shrinks as they learn to trust each other and work as a team. The time shrinks that it takes before you have the appointment. Does that make sense? Because they learn to trust each other. The second thing is, my skunk friends tell me that they actually learn that it's good to think about it before they have the conversation. They say, I'm less confrontational, I'm less emotional, I can express myself better if I actually have time to think about it. So what happens is, and this is the way God designed it to be, God designed us to grow together. The two shall become what? One. That's physically, that's emotionally, spiritually. He wants us to grow together. And so a turtle and the skunk, when they learn to work in partnership, they will become, the turtle will become a little more expressive. And they'll learn there's value in processing things verbally. And the skunk will learn it's actually good to consider something before you talk about it. Neither one, but do you see what our wonderful Creator did? He made us interdependent. He made us different so we complement each other, and so we will actually grow each other. I told you this last night, the best metaphor that I have heard for marriage is it's a school where we learn to love. We think we have this wonderful feeling of love when we get married. That's nice, it's good, but real love comes when we learn to work as a team and we learn to care about our partner's feelings and also express ours in a healthy way. Questions or comments? Please.
When you were talking about repair, also reconnecting with God, we talked in our small group about the triangle. The closer you are to God, the closer you are to each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How many of you have ever heard of the turtle and skunk before? How many of you feel like that's something you might be able to use? I think, here's why I think it's so important. If we're not using good tools and best practices, here's what will happen. We will fight about how we fight instead of solving problems. I know we have a lot of engineers in this church. Engineers are problem solvers, right? Is that good to quibble over the process instead of solving the problem? Is that efficient? No. So I think God's plan is principle-based, and I think that it's about solving problems. So one more tool, and then we're going to wrap up this part. I had a Volkswagen diesel Jetta. I loved that car. 49 miles to the gallon when I was on the freeway. Pretty good. I had to be careful. It had so much power. It was a standard, and I didn't like it when I was on the hills in Seattle, but everywhere else I really enjoyed, driving with the stick shift. I loved the power. But what I found out is Volkswagen had cheated, and when you went to get your emission checked, the software would click it over and it would run more efficient. Normally, that car was emitting 40 times the legal limit of emissions. They cheated. And it cost Volkswagen $15 billion to fix it, and they had to buy my car back. But I had this Volkswagen Jetta, and so when I went to gas our cars, I would have to be careful if I was gassing my car or my wife's car, because hers was a Toyota Camry and it needed just gasoline. Mine needed diesel. What happens if you put gasoline in a diesel? A friend of mine did that. It was $1,200 to fix it, because the car actually ran for just a little bit and then it just wouldn't run, and he had to get it fixed. It was $1,200. So it was important to put the right fuel in the right car. Would you agree with that? Okay. Here's a Bible verse that tells us that men and women need some different fuel emotionally. Ephesians 5:33. However, each one of you must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. What do you think? Someone tell me, what do you think it means when it says a husband must love his wife as he loves himself? What does that mean? What does that look like? Must love his wife as he loves himself. To what? Protect her? Put her first? Yeah. Let's say that a man gets his dream car. Money's no object, his dream car, truck, whatever it is. How good of care is he going to take of that vehicle? How often is he going to wash it and vacuum it? And wax it? Is anyone going to eat something with Parmesan cheese and French fries in his car? He's going to take good care of it, right? Would it be fair to say that the man would adore that car? Would that be too unmasculine to say that? He adores that car, right? So, what the text is saying, a man should love his wife as he loves himself. I would use the word adore there. I have a good friend who is a ministerial director in another conference, and we are great friends. And when we were at seminary over 30 years ago, he and his wife got married, and he told me a story of something that happened on the campus. No, actually, his wife told me the story. Sorry, his wife told me the story. He picked her up after class, and he said, let's go down by the fountain. Anyone have been on PUC campus and the big fountain there? And so he would, let's go down the fountain. It was a beautiful sunny day, and what he had done, he wanted to have Martinelli's toast her, and so he had went to the fountain. He sunk a bottle of Martinelli's against the wall of the fountain, and he put 2 little goblets in his backpack. So he picks her up at her class, and as he's walking, he holds her hand as he's walking in the sunshine down by the fountain on a beautiful day. They get down by the fountain, and they're sitting there on the ledge. I've been at that fountain. They're sitting there on the ledge. He's holding her hand. It's a beautiful day. He looks at her, and he says, boy, I wish I had some Martinelli so I could toast having you in my life. And she laughed, and she said, oh, that'd be really nice. And all of a sudden, he's rolling his sleeve up. He reaches into the fountain, and he holds up the Martinellis. He said, look what someone left for us. And she laughs, and then he gets in his backpack, and he pulls out 2 little goblets. And she laughs again, and she makes this little sound that when women make this sound, it's a good thing. Oh. It's a good sound. It's a good thing. He opens the Martinellis, pours 2, and he hands one to her. They click it, and then he looks in her eyes and says, here's to having you in my life. Now, here's my question. Ladies, how many of her girlfriends heard that story?
Every one of them, at least once.
You said at least once? Yeah. You notice she told me the story. He didn't tell me the story. Guys aren't going to tell that kind of story, are they? But she told me the story. I asked her. She said, oh, yeah, I told all my girlfriends. And let me ask you this. How much did that cost him? That was back in the 90s. That would have probably been at most $2 for the Martinellis in those days. And yet they still talk about it today. It didn't cost him much at all. What did it take of him? Thank you, Lonnie. He took thought. He had to think. Let me ask you this to the women. What worked? What was it about that worked so well? Okay, he planned it. What else? What was it that worked? The thought? The surprise. And the fact that he was showing his heart, right? He was showing she was precious to him, and that he was happy and thankful to have her in his life. In the Bible, it says that God rejoices, he will quiet us with his love, he will rejoice over us with singing. And I remember when my kids were small and I would hold them, I would sing to them. And I would sing little songs that my mother sang to me. And I just got a text from one of my cousins and his son. I got a text from his son, who is an Alaskan Airlines pilot. He has 2 little girls, and when he puts his little girls tonight, he sings this little song about a polar bear that my mother sang to me, and apparently it's a family thing, and no one else has heard of the song, but it's kind of goofy. And he wanted to know, did your family sing it too? And do you know where the song came from or whatever? We were wired to be delighted in. We are wired to be delighted in. Do you think she felt delighted in that day? What did that do for her emotionally? What fuel did that put in her car of her heart, her life, her self-confidence, it was amazing. So it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. There was one man who his wife said, I need more romantic attention from you. And so he was leaving his office, and he saw a man with a 5-gallon plastic bucket and roses in there. And he thought, perfect. I don't even have to get in my car. So he gave him $5, got the flowers, went home, gave them to his wife, and she was happy, and she gave him a kiss, and she's humming its tune as she goes to put them in water. So he thinks, okay, I figured that out. The next week, he sees the man with his 5-gallon bucket, and he pulls over, rolls his window down, gives him $5, takes the flowers, goes home, gives them to his wife. No kiss, no hug, but she does put him in water. The next week, there's the man, 5-gallon bucket, $5, takes him home, no kiss, no hug. She doesn't even put him in water. And he's like, honey, what's the deal? You said you needed romantic attention. And I'm doing that, and the first week it was great, but now it's like you don't even care. And she said, how much time did that take you? He said, it was really easy. He said, I just rolled my window down. The guy was right there by the parking garage. And how much did it cost you? He said, oh, it was only $5. He said, do you want me to drive clear across town and spend $50? Okay, was it about the money? What if he would have sat down at his desk and wrote a list of 20 things that I think are wonderful about you? Cost him no money. Would that have worked? What if he went and found a field with wildflowers and walked around and picked them for free and took them home? Would that work? Why? It's all about the heart, isn't it? God calls us, gentlemen, to adore our wives. And the fact that He calls us to do that, it doesn't mean they're needy. They are wired by the Creator for this. Ladies, do you agree? All right. The rest of the text says on, and the wife should respect her husband. And the word I like to use for this is admire. Gentlemen, have you ever played sports when a girl you like, or your wife, or a girlfriend, or whatever, is watching? Have you ever played sports when a girl you're romantically interested in is watching? What happens? What? A lot of motivation. He wants to put on a show, doesn't he? Why? Why? If we're back in grade school and a guy likes a little girl and they're playing kickball at recess, what is he going to do? He's going to go harder because he wants to impress her, because he is wired to need admiration. That's the way men are wired. Gentlemen, for the woman in your life, how important is it to you that she's proud of you? On a scale of 1 to 10, how big is that? How many of you gentlemen would raise your hand if you think that's a 9 or a 10? It's huge. It's huge. And so we're wired by that. The Creator made us interdependent. And we need different fuel, but we need emotional fuel from each other. Positive regard, we both need to be delighted in. And we're hungry for it. So, a husband and wife were sitting on the couch watching TV, and the wife had read this Bible verse, and she understood this to mean, I need to admire my husband. So she's sitting there beside him, and he's watching TV. And she's looking at him, and she's thinking, okay, what do I admire about him? And so she reaches over and grabs his bicep. And without thinking, he kind of flexes a little bit. And he looks over at her. Huh? And she said, oh, I was just admiring your muscles. The next night, after dinner, he disappeared for 45 minutes. She didn't know where he went. The next night, the same thing. The next night, she had to go out to the freezer in the garage. She went out to the garage, and there he was in the garage. He had installed a weight bench. Why, gentlemen? Why? Talk to me. Why? He craved being admired. We all take shots in life. There are things that make us feel less. And would it be an exaggeration, lady, to say you crave being adored appropriately? Genuinely, in a heartfelt way, right? Would you admit, men, that you crave being admired? Would you be vulnerable enough to say that you crave it? Here's the thing. Here's the thing. I've been a pastor a long time, and I've seen situations where men get off the path. Some of that time, and I'm not blaming the wives for this, we're all responsible for our choices. Some of that is where somebody else in their life admires them, and they get off track. I've seen women get off track, and you know what often happens? Somebody is kind of adoring to them. They pay attention, they listen, whatever. What I'm saying is this. If you meet that need at home, most times, now obviously there are times where people can have problems, addictions or whatever. I'm saying under normal circumstances, you meet that need of a person feeling adored at home, admired at home. Even when you're not with them, you're like a bodyguard because you send them out into the world with that tank filled. Does that make sense? You have no idea how much I wish someone would have sat me down and told me this when I got married. I just didn't know. I've had to learn things the hard way and the long way, and it's a lot more difficult. I really believe that at the end of time, our relationships are under more attack, but I also believe that in the end of time is a time where God wants to do healing, and He wants to turn hearts and heal hearts. And I believe that is going to be one aspect of the soul winning that will happen in the end of the world. Because in Revelation 12, it talks about the time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation. And then it says, and those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. And I believe healing in families will communicate to the world, there's something here. There's something here. So I'm so proud of you, Erica, and your team for having a vision for strengthening and nurturing families and relationships. And I will see you in a few minutes for church.